joined now by Angela Stroud. She's an associate professor of sociology and social justice at Northland College in Wisconsin. Angela, I don't want to get ahead of us. I mean, we really don't know what's happening here, whether it's a mass shooting or if it was a dispute and people were shooting at one another. But we do know that this shooting comes on the 6-year anniversary of the Parkland High School mass shooting that happened in Florida. And after that, Dave Cullen came out, wrote a book called Parkland, The Birth of a Movement, and it looked like these young high school activists were really going to move the needle as far as gun control, and yet that really hasn't happened. Can you talk about that and where we are as a country at this stage?
Yeah, where we are as a country is a really mixed bag. I mean, a lot of those students and that activism did get some results. We, for the first time a couple of years ago, passed federal gun legislation that President Biden signed into law. We have seen some progress, but because we're a nation of states, a federation, we see really uneven progress. So Missouri is one of those states that has struggled mightily with gun violence, and for the last 14 years in a row, it's ranked #1 in terms of gun violence for Black men. So it's a state that really just hasn't faced the facts of where we're at with gun violence.
Angela, can you, I want to touch on a little bit more on what you're talking about. One of the things that we've seen when it comes to gun violence is this some people pushing to get laws changed, but then you always see the NRA kind of stepping in and trying to prevent that. But the NRA's kind of hobbled and weakened in recent years. Can you talk a little bit about that, and does that change the dynamic at all?
I think it changes the dynamic, but they were so successful for so long that there's a bit of political entrenchment at this point. And so I would say now is the time to act, though, for those who want sensible reforms to gun laws that would make states safer. And we see states that have sensible laws actually have much lower gun violence rates. So this isn't an inevitability. This isn't something that's natural. It is a product of our laws that allow for the proliferation of firearms that end up in the wrong hands. So you're right. The NRA is weak. I think this is a time for people to act because of that. And it's a time for people at the state level, lawmakers, many of whom want to, celebrate at places like the Chiefs Parade, to recognize they're the ones in charge here. They need to own this, and they need to own making progress to reduce gun violence.
I'll get to that in just a moment, but let me, this was just released by Brady, which is one of the oldest gun violence prevention organizations in the United States, and it says, quote, "It remains wholly devastating to live in the only country in the industrialized world to suffer such astounding rates of gun violence. How many times have we seen a joyful celebration turn into tragedy? Why do these tragedies keep happening? Because of the guns. The Super Bowl is American as apple pie, and unfortunately, so is gun violence." I want to get your thoughts on that quote, because it's really interesting, and I think a lot of people would probably agree with that sentiment.
I mean, the data show it. We're the only country in the world with a problem like this. And I totally agree with the sentiment. This is supposed to be a day of celebrating one of those things we call quintessentially American. And instead, now we have thousands and thousands of people traumatized. And that's an important thing to know. When we talk about gun violence, it's not however many end up being killed, which is a tragedy, or however people end up being wounded, maybe for who knows how long. It's everybody who's been traumatized. And so this is such an American social problem, and it's also, I think, an American social problem that we fail to address because we haven't resolved some of the deep issues we have as a country, and guns symbolize those issues. And so we really need to think deeply about what kind of nation we want to be.
And before I let you go, one more question. It's 2 words: election year. This is an election year. Is this going to be a campaign issue, do you think? Do you think there can be any movement?
It of course will be a campaign issue. Will there be movement? That remains to be seen. People need to get organized.
Angela Stroud, Associate Professor of Sociology and Social Justice at Northland College in Wisconsin. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.